I'd like to start by thanking all of you for being here today at our Pac-12 Football Championship Game presented by 76, and for your coverage of Pac-12 football throughout the season. This is our first year in Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium, and we are all excited for our student athletes and our fans to have the opportunity to experience one of the very best stadiums in the NFL, in the entertainment capital of the world. I want to thank the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, the Raiders, MGM Resorts International, Resorts World, and Allegiant Stadium for being terrific partners and bringing this marquee event to life. I'd also like to thank the Pac-12 staff who've worked tirelessly with our partners to create the best experience for our student athletes and fans. Finally, I'd like to thank all of our sponsors, and especially our presenting sponsor, 76. And of course, our broadcast partners, ABC and ESPN, who helped make our championship an incredible national showcase for Pac-12 football to millions of fans around the country. Before I talk about our game tonight, or the broader state of Pac-12 football, I want to quickly reflect on my first 5 months as commissioner. As you all know, there have been more developments impacting the future of college sports in recent months than at any other time in the history of college athletics. We have seen the launch of name, image, and likeness, the Supreme Court ruling in Alston, an ongoing CFP expansion discussion, conference realignment, and the NCAA's decision to reconsider the very governance of college athletics. While each of these developments represent potential challenges, we also see opportunities for the future of college athletics and specifically for the Pac-12. These issues also afford us the occasion to rethink how we approach our most important priority, supporting student athletes. I'd be happy to answer questions about any of those developments shortly. Turning to tonight's game, we have number 17, Utah, representing our South Division and making their third appearance in our championship game in the last 4 years. Against number 10, Oregon, representing our North Division and making their third consecutive Pac-12 Football Championship Game appearance. As you all know, this game is a rematch of the game at Utah 2 weeks ago. That was the most watched Pac-12 regular season game in 7 years. Both teams come into this game highly motivated. A trip to the Rose Bowl is on the line, and potentially even a CFP invitation, depending on the outcome of 4 other games this weekend. Oregon has been to 8 Rose Bowls in the past 105 years and has won 3 times in the last 10 years, beating Wisconsin twice and beating Florida State in a CFP semifinal. For Utah, this would be the very first Rose Bowl in their storied program's history. As I think about the state of Pac-12 football overall, there are certainly some positives we can take from the season while recognizing that we still have work to do to achieve our goals. Since before my first day on the job, I made clear that the Pac-12's football goal is to optimize CFP playoff invitations and ultimately win national championships. As you all know, Oregon had the best non-conference win in all of college football early in the season and was in the CFP conversation until the loss at Utah just 2 weeks ago. Like many of our other Pac-12 football programs, both Oregon and Utah feature elite student athletes who will play on Sunday and elite head coaches. I think it's fair to say that we have many of the ingredients to be successful and achieve our football goals. But we also realize that we have significant work to do. We have some disappointing non-conference losses this year, and in my opinion, not enough of the great high school players from our footprint currently play in the Pac-12. As a conference, we need to continue to hire and retain the best coaches, and we need to make the right decisions related to both the structure of our divisions and championship game, and with respect to conference and non-conference scheduling, to best position the Pac-12 for CFP invitations. What I can say with confidence is that there is a total alignment among our great universities, all of our athletic departments, and our conference staff on our football goals. I believe you have seen this season, especially in the last week, a substantial change in the way our schools are embracing our football goals, investing in new football facilities, and stepping up, not just to retain our great coaches, but to attract exceptional new coaches to the Pac-12. These moves are already paying dividends in recruiting. Finally, before I take your questions, I want to thank our presidents and chancellors and all of our athletic directors for being so supportive these past months. It was great to be able to visit all 12 of our campuses in my first 100 days and meet so many student athletes, coaches, and administrators. The alignment among our 12 schools is very strong, and we are positioned for success. The future of the Pac-12 football has never been more promising. With that, I'll be happy to take your questions.
James Krepia from the Oregonian. Commissioner, obviously you were at the CFP discussion earlier this week, the conference. Where do you stand on the current dynamic of 12 versus 8 versus 4? It has been intimated that you're no longer against 12, and within 12, are you for the 6 and 6 or the alliances 5 and 1? Where do things stand? And it looks like in the bigger picture that this may or may not, there's a lot of questions as to whether it's going to happen. Can you afford to, given this conference, pass up on $450 million on the table or north of that if a deal's not struck in the next month?
Yeah, the Pac-12 position on this has not changed at all over the last few months. We have been for expansion, and we have been for early expansion sooner rather than later. We are very supportive of multiple proposals, and we did not indicate that we would vote against any of the proposals that are currently being discussed, both 8 and 12. I think it's important to recognize the dynamics. The dynamics are we are in a contractual relationship with 10 other entities that runs through the end of the 25 season. In that time period, if we want to expand, all 11 have to say yes. It has to be unanimous. So I think one of the great things that we started doing in the meeting in Dallas this past week is to start focusing on what we want the playoffs to look like beyond the current term. And I think we don't need 11 people to say yes to get to a solution that would be good for college football. And if we find that solution, then we can focus on whether or not we can also get to that solution for 24 and 25, which I think would be great for college athletics, but also great for our student athletes. Remember, our current playoff system in football allows only 3% of our student athletes to compete for a championship. That's compared with 18 to 25% on average for the rest of college sports. It's a broken system. We need to fix it.
Hi, George. Brandon Kammerman with K-Val in Eugene. You mentioned retaining and hiring coaches and investing resources into football programs. Obviously, that's been a topic of conversation this week and will be in the coming weeks. What is your role in that? Is this a conversation you have with the presidents and chancellors about the money that could eventually be coming into the conference and how that could play into investing in the football facilities and in coaching?
I certainly give them my opinion, and I explain to them the competitive realities of college football, but it's their decision at the end of the day. Each of the presidents and chancellors working through their kind of individual mechanisms that each of the schools have to decide who to hire, how much to offer. We don't get involved in that at all.
Patrick Kinahan, Zone Sports Network in Salt Lake City, Utah. Do you favor two divisions, or would you be okay with just one conference?
So I think it depends on where the college football playoff expansion ends. Remember, I said our football goals are to optimize CFP invitations. So depending on whether or not there are AQs, depending on whether or not those AQs are tied to whether or not you're a Power 5 conference, I think we would think differently about it. What I will say is that I separate the idea of whether or not you need to have divisions from who should play in our championship game. You could still have divisions for scheduling purposes, as an example, and take the two best teams as opposed to the best team from the North and the best team for the South, if that turned out to be the solution that allowed us to get to the most CFP invitations in whatever the format is going forward.
James Krepia again. Commissioner, to kind of follow on that point, what is the timeline for a 8 versus 9 game discussion, and with the Alliance and 2022 and thoughts like that? as soon as next season? When is a timeline for that? If you're talking about in conjunction with the CFP, are we talking later January, like a year or so ago?
Yeah.
One. Two, you mentioned that this matchup, Oregon-Utah, was the most watched in several years for the conference. If you move away from divisions, or if you do a potted system, Desert Mountain schools, California schools, Northwest schools, if we're scheduling at a uniform conference, that would be a matchup that happens less likely, theoretically. What would be the value? You've also intimated that you could have those alliance matchups throughout the season. What would be the value of replacing an Oregon-Utah mid-November game with a Oregon-Syracuse game?
Yeah, I don't think you can say we would replace one with the other. It's much more complicated than that. So two things there. One is, as we think about how to schedule within the conference, I think it's important to understand like a lot of different dynamics, right? All of the schools want to get to Southern California for recruiting. Some historic rivalries need to be continued. There's very complicated issues about who gets to play who, and you would certainly do it in a way where you're also optimizing for great ratings over time. That's different than the discussion of whether or not to go from 9 to 8. And what I would say about that is, in the current system where everyone is booked out for several years, we can't do that independently, right? We can't go to 8 because it's tough to find people to play if you lose one game starting next year without a lot of kind of lead time on that. But if either our ACC partners or our Big Ten partners could free up a game, much more likely for our friends at the Big Ten because they're playing 9 games a year now. If they could free up a game, we're ready to go today.
Josh Newman, Salt Lake Tribune. As legalized sports betting becomes wider and more available, what do you believe the future of that is in terms of athletic departments and even conferences trying to dive in and monetize that?
Yeah. So the broad answer for sports betting is, legalized sports betting is predicted to be somewhere around a $25 to $30 billion business by 2025. It's one of the fastest growing businesses, certainly in media. That is against a backdrop of illegal sports betting being about $150 billion estimated business today. So people are betting on our games. And after the NFL, college football is the next thing people bet on, and then the NBA and college basketball. So we're kidding ourselves if we don't think people are betting on our games today. That said, we're in a patchwork of state laws that are different from state to state, and some states don't have state laws, and some states won't have state laws for quite a while, including states in our footprint. What I think of is it's better to have it legalized, regulated, taxed, and to use some of that money to protect our student athletes and protect the integrity of the game. And more broadly, what I think is that the conference will not be making a decision by ourselves about whether or not to take on sponsorships from sports betting. That's a school opportunity, and each of our schools will have to be making those decisions on their own. One of our universities, Colorado, already has a sports betting partner sponsorship with PointsBet. They're the only ones in our conference who have done a deal like that so far, but every school will have to make their own decision. From the conference level, we're going to provide as much information and opportunity and then allow each of the schools to make their own decision. There are other business models related to sports betting, particularly as it relates to data, that are more of a conference opportunity that we will pursue.
With ESPN, you said 11 partners have to all agree on something, but don't feel that's necessary to get to a decision. Is there a mechanism that could change that where it wouldn't require all 11, and how do you foresee that playing out?
Well, if you're going to change the CFP prior to the end of the current term, all 11 have to agree because all 11 are signatories to the contracts that put together the current CFP model. If you look beyond the current CFP model, you don't start by saying all 11 of us have to agree, I think. I think you start by saying, what is the group that needs to agree on a model that we can then hopefully invite the rest to join us in? So it's just a different paradigm about how you think about who gets to make a decision about what that model looks like.
Yeah, and then also, if USC is competing at a national level, what kind of an impact would that make on the value of the conference's media rights?
It will certainly help the value of our media rights if any of our schools are higher in the rankings, winning more games, winning more non-conference games. All of that helps the media rights. So the news from the last week was terrific, and it was not just the news from USC, although that was fantastic. the investment that other schools are making in their coaches helps our media rights over time.
Steve Woodward with KORE in Eugene. Commissioner, a lot of the media rights discussions have been centralized around the television broadcasts and streaming broadcasts. Yet we have hundreds of radio stations within the Pac-12 footprint that only have access to SEC, ACC, and Big Ten radio broadcasts, with Pac-12 radio broadcasts for games slim to none for the pickings. How can you address the radio opportunity that the Pac-12 conference has moving forward?
But when we think about the rights that are coming up for renegotiation at the end of 24, for us, it is our entire bundle of rights, all media, including audio. And we are thinking quite broadly about how to slice and dice that content and make it available on as many platforms as possible. We are balancing the revenue opportunities against broad exposure for our content and against competitive advantage that the distribution can create. Those are kind of the three criteria that we'll be balancing. But don't think we're only thinking about video. We're thinking about the audio product as well.
James Kirby again, just a follow and then something unrelated, Commissioner, but to get to what Kyle was just asking in your response about the CFP and inviting others post this current deal. I want to make sure I'm reading between the lines here a bit correctly. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is there on any level at the Power Conference Commissioner level, Alliance and non-Alliance members, a discussion about forming a deal post the current deal, which is kind of what you're intimating at here, and then inviting the group of 5 members to join you if they are so inclined, and therefore expedite things in the current deal by setting up a deal in the future?
Yes, I think one of the mistakes that was made in the expansion discussions was in June, before everybody who needed to agree to something, we announced a proposal. And I think there's been a lot of speculation and kind of bartering through the media about who's voting yes or no for which expansion model. And I think that does a disservice. I think the right thing to do is get the right people in the room, settle on a model, and then announce it, as opposed to announce it and then try and get people to agree to it. So with due respect, I'm not going to answer that question.
And people will know that you didn't answer yes or no to that hypothetical. Okay. Unrelated. I'm sure that won't come up next week here. On football officiating, Commissioner.
Yes.
I'm not going to go through every call, and fans have their issues. Specifically, there were, in Oregon games, multiple instances this season where there were either officiating mechanisms. At the end of the first half of the Colorado game, there was a issue with the sticks, and there was a play that was missed. That was a mechanism issue. In the Washington game, there was a call that was reviewed that could not be reviewed. Multiple spots that had to be overturned where line judges moved their initial spot or never set a spot prior to a review. A misannouncement of a first down in distance when it was actually second, which the sticks did reflect, but the play calling and the coordinators didn't know what down it was. What is your assessment of these issues? Because it has come up before. Why has the conference not been as transparent on it, given its past? And has the Michael Mothershed crew, who worked that game, been disciplined in any way?
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about specific discipline of any crews. I every Monday morning during the football season, review every controversial call with our officiating executives. We go through every single call and we determine whether or not an issue raises to the level of needing to put out a public statement about it. Historically, our conference, on average, 2 or 3 times a year has issued a statement. This year, we did not issue a statement the entire season because we didn't find anything that was worthy of issuing a statement. Doesn't mean every call was exactly perfect, but it meant it was within the margin of errors. This is a human endeavor. It is difficult. This happens in every conference and in every sport, and this is something that we'll continue to review, will continue to be better. And what I will tell you is that if we find a crew that makes a mistake or an individual that makes a mistake, we discipline them, but we don't make that a public thing. It wouldn't be appropriate.
Ryan Abraham with 24/7 Sports. You talked about having the new coaches being able to kind of boost the media rights, specifically with USC and hiring Lincoln Riley, taking a blue blood, from a blue blood program. Anything significance for the conference being able to, one of the programs, to do something like that?
Well, I think he's a very high-profile coach, and I think you've seen that in some of the recruiting news that has come out since he announced he was leaving Oklahoma and coming to USC. I think that can do nothing but help the conference. And the interesting thing is, I don't think it just helps USC. I think it raises the profile for recruiting and for the quality of our football for all of our schools when one of our schools makes an investment like that. So I'm very thankful for USC for doing that.
Josh Newman, Salt Lake Tribune. We're in the middle of a initial 2-year contract to hold the title game here. If I'm not mistaken, the Pac-12 tournament at T-Mobile, that contract is up. Have there been discussions formally or otherwise to extend those two?
Yeah, I'm generally of the opinion that you do a deal and then you announce it. You don't talk about whether or not you're doing a deal or negotiating a deal. Both of those are near and dear to my heart. I was the president of sports and entertainment at MGM Resorts. I sat on the other side of both of those negotiations. I'm incredibly proud tonight to see one of those hard-fought negotiations come to fruition. Some of my colleagues who worked on that were on the other side of the table and are sitting in the room with us today. Listen, I think Vegas is an incredible place for our championships, and not just football and basketball. And I think you'll see it tonight. And I think when you compare the championship game tonight to kind of our historic championship games, it will reflect very well. And you'll be very proud of what we put on the field today and the experience that our fans, and particularly the student athletes, have being in Vegas.
George Adam Rittenberg with ESPN. I'm a little late here. Just building off of Ryan's question, is there anything that the other Pac-12 schools or the league as a whole can take from USC's process of attracting a coach like Lincoln Riley, putting its best everything out there to get someone like that to raise the profile of not just USC but the league?
Yeah, I think they see the value of investing in coaches. I think, it's kind of obvious. If you get great coaches, great players want to come and play. I think we're very fortunate that we now have 12 great coaches in the league. So, this is a constant carousel, unfortunately. It's part of the nature of college football. But I'm very proud of the coaches we have now, and I think we're going to be able to attract and retain terrific football talent. And I'm very, very focused, although I don't get involved in recruiting at all, I'm very focused on helping our schools figure out how to retain some of the best talent in the country, which happens to be in our footprint. We want them to stay home. Thank you all. Appreciate you all being here. Thank you.